at some point you stumble across something and you go through your brief wake-up process, like you've seen a glitch in the Matrix, and you've then kind of maybe question, is there things more important than being happy?
And what are those things that are more important than being happy?
I think it's authenticity and being who you really are.
Because this is a topic which really impacted me. It plagued my conscience and it plagued my soul. Perhaps the only thing to do so since leaving Jehovah's Witnesses. And the first mouthful of that steak, orgasmic.
Orgasmic.
And this isn't going to sit well with you if you come to my conclusions. To then say, I'm sorry, but I'm a selfish animal.
Harrison Covert is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Truth Hurts podcast.
It's finally here. Long anticipated. We thought about it. It's happening.
All right, so we've been planning this for about a year now, and it's really nice to be here with you, Matt Fearn. You'll recognise him from a few of my videos, most notably probably the 10 things Jehovah's Witnesses say about you once they've left your door.
He was so smug. You know what, I bet if we built a time machine and we brought Jesus of Nazareth back and asked him to place his fingers in the wounds of his hands, he still wouldn't believe.
But normally my videos are carefully planned, scripted, and so I thought, let's get a podcast. More of an informal setting where we can discuss different topics, dissect people's questions, conversations that people want us to have that we wouldn't normally have if it wasn't for more of a laid-back podcast setting. So the topic of this and the following podcast is life after leaving. From the process of waking up to finally, whether it be disassociation, disfellowshipping, or fading from the religion, how do we cope? Friends and family, sex and relationships, life and death, purpose and happiness. We've split those 4 topics up into 2 different podcasts. Today we'll be dealing with life and death, purpose and happiness. More of a philosophical discussion, would you say?
Yeah, long format, laid back, more chilled, more relaxed.
And we're going to be answering questions such as, where do we, as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, now derive purpose in life? Can you be truly happy after leaving Jehovah's Witnesses? And as both of us are agnostic atheists, how do we cope with the death of a loved one if indeed you believe it is the ultimate end in life?
Harrison, before we go into it, okay, I've got a brand new morning routine. I have these.
What?
These are bitter colas, okay? I work with a couple of gentlemen from Zimbabwe and Uganda, and they swear by them, and now I've incorporated them into every sort of morning. It is the morning I've woken up, fasted. They're good. It's changed my life. It doesn't get easier.
I don't know what a bitter cola is. Can you fill me and the listeners, the viewers?
I don't know truly what it is, okay?
Should I be taking this? Is it legal?
I think so. I think so. Just try it.
And you think this is going to be beneficial for the podcast?
It'll get you going. It gets me going.
I mean, it looks a bit dirty. Do we peel off this?
I clean my nuts. No, it's fine. You can dip it in the water if you want.
Save comments like that for the sex and relationship section.
We will.
So
it never gets easier. It never gets easier. And it dries your mouth out. But everything I've realised, if it tastes horrific, it's good for you at some point. I'm fine. I'm gonna have to crack out the monster. Oh my god!
And you have one of these every day.
Every day.
What does it do?
Gets you going. It's like a stim. I don't even know. It's like having 3 of these.
Okay, well, I hope if I die live on this podcast, obviously, Matt, you can upload the footage to YouTube. I can upload it. The death of Harrison Coe, the Truth Hurts. I'm not sure I'll be having another one of those, but we'll see. If it really hypes me up for this podcast, then same again when we record episodes.
It's a ritual, and then maybe we can get a sponsorship going from Bitter Cola. I don't even know if they have like a company that's bought them online. All right.
Okay, so the first topic in this podcast is purpose and happiness. We had a couple of questions in, one from Laurie Lear, who's a Realm of the Gods level patron, who asks, are you happier now that you've left, or were you happier in the religion? And then another question, when I abandoned the Jehovah's Witness teachings, I witnessed for myself firsthand just how wonderful and kind worldly people are. I saw the beauty in Satan's world, just how magical and lovely life actually is. Could you guys elaborate on how your perspective has changed for the better? So in those comments, we have one asking, well, is it better or is it worse now that you're out? And the other one is quite clearly saying, I feel better. And I think there is almost a pressure within your own mind and the exjw community as a whole to say, oh, thank goodness I'm out of that dump. You know, I was so miserable inside the religion, and now that I'm out, I'm free and I'm so happy in life. And maybe that's true in a few people's cases. But, Matt, the exjw community as a whole, do you think it is a generally happy place?
I would say it's a mixed bag. I mean, there is a great cost incurred on the individual once leaving. You know, you've turned your back, or maybe you've left, or you've been exiled from your community, and you've got to kind of try and recover and perhaps start your life from scratch all over again. You go through that neurochemical collapse, and you know, a lot of people, they hit rock bottom and they really struggle with these sort of things. But it's in our lowest moments that sometimes the most interesting opportunities come up, and you can kind of figure out who you want to be. And I think this is definitely touching on it when you talked about meaning and purpose and happiness. And look, I know that things like the child sex abuse scandals, they're abhorrent, they're terrible. You know, some of the treatment of individuals in the religion are very poor and inhumane. And there's a lot of, you know, let's say teachings that we don't make sense. Don't make sense. We look at it retroactively and we go, well, that's terrible. That's the reason why I've left. But maybe I speak for a lot of individuals that I came to the conclusion that no matter if I was happy as a Jehovah's Witness or not, I mean, I had a fairly decent life. You know, I was popular. I had a great relationship. I had a good standing in the congregation. It is at some point you stumble across something and you go through your brief wake up process, like you've seen a glitch in the Matrix, and you kind of realize that maybe this isn't for you, and you then kind of maybe question, is there things more important than being happy?
And what are those things that are more important than being happy?
I think it's authenticity and being who you really are. I mean, there's I don't want to wear this mask and be this person that isn't genuine. And I realized that Jehovah's Witness teachings and principles, and I guess the person I was when I was a Jehovah's Witness wasn't who I really was. And I would rather engage with the world and be a less, perhaps overall happy person, but actually be who I really am.
So that's interesting, because obviously, as I just said, Laurie Lear's question, are you happier now that you've left, or were you happier in the religion? It's not black and white. You can't just say happier now left or happier in the religion. I think if some people are honest with themselves, they will say they were happier in the religion. Whether they admit that to others, that's a different question. But what we need to do is dissect, analyse different parts of our life. Okay, this part here, yeah, I'm definitely better off. I feel free, I feel liberated. I can be my, as you say, my authentic self. However, you know, community, these different aspects that were once automatically filled almost from birth, they've now just evaporated into thin air. And you're left trying to clutch at these straws and gain the same meaning and the same purpose in your life. The reality is that you may never be able to do that.
No, it's something you could always be chasing forever. But then I suppose that could be maybe a meaning and purpose in itself, is that voyage of self-discovery, isn't it? And I think that's probably the thing that most people need to start with when they leave the religion, is you go, right, who am I actually? And I think that's the journey that I began on when I left, is because through those brief like flashes of imagination that I had while I was waking up, I was thinking to myself, who could I be if I wasn't shackled to this thing? And I think that was the main thing that motivated me. That's the thing that kind of turned to nitroglycerin in my veins and allowed me to kind of achieve escape velocity from this religion and kind of begin to perhaps orbit something else.
So you were 20. You literally had your whole adulthood ahead of you. For me, on the other hand, you know, I was in my mid-20s. I didn't want the religion to be false. I really, really didn't. Because my authentic self, I believed, was the person in the congregation, caring, considerate, compassionate. I remember when I met with the elders and I told them, this is a relief to talk to them. It's a relief to get this off my chest. I told them, I know how it feels to come out to a family where they don't approve of homosexual relationships. Because that's exactly what I was doing with the elders. I was saying, you don't understand this, but I'm not you anymore. And I can never be you again. You don't have answers to my questions.
No.
Let's focus on this second question. I witnessed for myself just how wonderful and kind worldly people are. I saw the beauty in Satan's world. On the one hand, when we explain our past, our trauma that we suffered to worldly people, they of course will be empathetic. They of course will be compassionate. They of course will say, that's disgusting. Your family are doing this to you. Your friends have turned their backs on you. So we will get that initial impression that the world is a kind place. And thank goodness it is, because I was treated like this inside the religion. However, do you think, Matt, to paint the whole of almost Satan's world as magical, lovely, and how kind these people are, is a false portrayal?
I would say it definitely depends on, obviously, your geographical location, what it's like in your local area. I mean, it's hard to say, you know, some people could probably have solely a positive experience when leaving. I'm not saying that that's impossible, but I think there's a lot of, I would say, maybe legacy systems or legacy behaviors that you carry from the Jehovah's Witnesses that perhaps can sometimes lead you to being victimized a lot. I mean, this perpetual kind of focus in the religion of always being adherent to authority, backing down, you know, with the elders, always putting yourself to self aside. You know, you become not very good at really dealing with conflict. This can cause issues in jobs, in the workplace, and you feel like you could potentially be sort of dominated all the time because you're not. You know, you don't really use, in the Jehovah's Witnesses, you don't really get into too many arguments or conflicts. And I think that then leads to us being very poor at sometimes conflict resolution. And then we end up kind of rolling over all the time. And there's a potential for after living a life as an ex-Jehovah's Witness kind of filled with sort of resentment, as perhaps maybe you don't get the most out of relationships that you otherwise would when you were in the religion, where your relationships were, let's say, a lot more regulated by the congregation.
If we expand this from XJWs in general to the wider world itself, we have to think, well, it's not potentially just us as XJWs who have this void, this hole in us, and this lack of real happiness and purpose. Jehovah's Witnesses are right in certain things, and the world, while not everyone out there has your best interests in mind, some people will intentionally be out to scam you, to hurt you, to steal from you, things that would never happen normally within the Jehovah's Witness organisation. This is reality. The world is often a dark place. They're also right in the fact that the world has changed. It's more materialistic than it's ever been. It's more focused on narcissism, on yourself, on how am I looking today? Have I trained? How my biceps pop in? I need to take a picture. Can I get 300 likes? I think the problem, why we're so unhappy, it boils down to the fact that as a species, unlike any other on Earth, we possess a cranial capacity, an intelligence, a consciousness that's unparalleled in the animal kingdom. I mean, I've brought my dog Sparrow here on this 7-hour trip today down south to Cornwall, and Sparrow is a lovely dog. Why is he so happy? Well, he eats, he sleeps, he raves, he repeats. That's his life. Maybe we can replace rave with poop, eat, sleep, poop, repeat.
Yeah.
And he's happy to do that because he doesn't look in the mirror and say, who am I? Who was I yesterday? Was I happier back then? I've lost all my parents. They took me away from my parents. Forget what Jehovah's Witnesses did. Harrison took me away from my brothers and sisters, from my mum as a pup. He doesn't think like that. He's just happy to live in the moment. And so, as opposed to at one time as a species going back, we were focused on survival, on reproducing. Now we have all these things. They're so easily available. We don't have to think about survival. We work a basic job, earning a basic wage, and then we have free time. And it's just a case of potentially filling that with distraction.
Yeah, with leisure activities. I would say that probably our psychology is very well geared up to dealing with probably a lot of very horrific things. I mean, when you think about peasants in the Middle Ages and stuff like that, the rate of childhood mortality, you'd be surprised how these people woke up out of bed in the morning. They should be crippled with PTSD, but somehow our psychology can manage that. What we seem to really struggle with at the moment in the Western world, at least, is these almost first world problems of constant discontentment. And we have through social media the kind of normalization of extremes, because unfortunately we seem to really like things that are very bad for our mental health, and comparing ourselves to individuals that are, let's say, 1 in 10,000, and then we constantly compare our lives to that over and over again. And we're thinking, if we don't get this level of whatever it is, wealth, physique, relationship, we'll never really be happy. And that's a very difficult thing, because I suppose you could always, as a Jehovah's Witness with meaning and purpose, you can fall back on, don't worry, it will always be okay in the end. It's like going around with, I think I've said this to you before, when you're a Jehovah's Witness and you kind of don't really care too much about the results of your exams in school, or the outcomes of certain things, pursuing higher education, whatever your particular job is because you have a belief system that makes you think you have a winning lottery ticket in your pocket. It doesn't matter, because at some point, and on a day that you don't know, Armageddon is going to arrive, and you're going to wake up in your dream log cabin with a couple of pandas, cracking open some I don't know, Anthony Morris whiskey, pouring it out, passing it out, and everything is going to be okay. Whereas now, I think we go home and we constantly focus maybe on the things that we don't have. And we even attach ourselves to things that aren't real, because let's be honest, a lot of the stuff we see online is this hyper, stimulating, euphoric experience that's a snapshot, and where they're like, why isn't my entire life like this? Well, the truth is nobody's life is like that, but we're all chasing it.
Oh, we all are indeed. I think the main problem derives from boredom. That feeling of, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to fill my time with? Let's put on Netflix. We love a story. That's what taps into our subconscious, is our species history around a campfire, listening to our elders tell stories, listening to each other tell stories. What did you get up to today? And obviously today, many people live alone. Many people ask their partner how was work. They put straight on the TV and they watch these epic stories and epic tales, but it doesn't hit the same fulfillment of our social needs that these real life experiences in the past ever would. I mean, one series that I did really enjoy, and I know you enjoyed too, hence the beard and the hair, is Vikings. I loved the series Vikings, and if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. Although, of course, it's created looking back on history, and the actors aren't living those lives in reality, they are trying to emulate what happened in the past, and it is based on real storylines of real people like Ragnar Lothbrok in the Kings in England. What we found back then was that, although I wouldn't trade my life for theirs, I like a washing machine, I like a dishwasher, I like a takeaway, I like lighting at the flick of the switch, I like being warm inside with central heating. You cannot compare it to what they had back then with regards to exploration, novelty, excitement. They would go on a boat, a band of brothers. They would hear about this land where the trees are as tall as the clouds. They reach up into the sky and the gods. And that would just, spur them on. We need to hit this land. Of course, at the end of the series, spoiler alert, they get to America. But they didn't know what was really there. They just listened to a story about it. They went out in hope. What was on this land? What were the women like? What was the land like? What was the food like? And now, of course, we sit at home and we have a map of the world on the wall. And we think, well, nothing's left to be discovered. People in the world are basically all the same in this kind of global identity of social media. Places used to have this unique interest, a unique way of life, but now everyone's the same, everyone dresses the same, in the Western world at least. And so we've completely denied ourselves of almost what it was to be human for so much of our evolutionary past. And so, I mean, if I was to speak personally, I think that is what leads to a loss in my life and loss in everyone's life on the world today, is there is no journey, there is no hope. And so as a species now we're looking to the skies, aren't we? We're looking to Mars, we're looking to other planets as a hope for the future. Can we set up a substantial and resourceful and sustainable way of life on Mars in the future when this goes? So it's very similar to what the Vikings had, but they used to get on a ship. Now these rockets cost hundreds of millions, don't they?
Well, yes, it's definitely something that is out of. It's not on the cards for the everyday person, is it? You know,
No.
it's a very few individuals. You know, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, the individuals that can actually explore these sorts of things. You know, you can count on one hand. And it kind of reminds me of Nietzsche's Last Man is kind of where we're living in now. Is we've made the world small through international travel. You know, I can remember, you know, waking up in Miami and I'm going to bed in my cottage in Cornwall. You know, that's a very bizarre thing, isn't it? And I think by shrinking the world and kind of taking the mysticism and the joy out of life, you do rob yourself to a certain extent.
So how can we find happiness? We've said why we're not happy. We said the problems social media causes and things like this to the modern everyday individual. How can we find happiness? I think that second comment from Irene, part 2 I haven't read yet. I myself, she says, get excited over the little things, such as my cosy soft pillow to lay my heavy head on at night, soft clean towels fresh from the dryer. Life is magical and wonderful if you pay close attention. So while Irene, we might not necessarily have agreed with the fact that Satan's system is you know, an objectively good place filled with good, positive people, what we can agree on, I think, from both of our personal experience, is that those things that I just mentioned, the what we class as the basics of modern living, I still can't get over them. I can't get over the fact that you do that and 1 minute later you have boiling water. And we don't have to set up we don't think about any of this. As Irene says, a soft pillow in a bed. How many people throughout history went to bed cold, went to bed hungry, and we just stuff our faces? And it doesn't cost a fortune. I know there's a cost of living crisis in the UK, but how much would we actually be willing to spend on keeping our house warm? These things are invaluable.
Yeah, they're not things that most people are willing to compromise on. I think, you know, not so long ago, lots of people were getting bills through the post that were like 10 times the electricity bill.
Yeah, it went up about 1,000%, didn't it?
Yeah, it was an awful lot, and I think people cut their usage by about 2%. So it shows how much, really, even faced with that massive cost. And I know there's different policies and all the rest of it, perhaps being put in place to reduce that cost that will be incurred on us. It shows that we're not really willing to compromise very much on those little luxuries that we have.
So I suppose that's what gives us these moments of happiness during the day and a positive framework on our life. But just before we move on to the next category, purpose. Purpose. Is it possible to have a real purpose in a world in which we know everything's kind of going downhill?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, there really is no purpose. I mean, you could. I mean, I would look at biology and be like, okay, reproduction is kind of like an abstract purpose. It's not something that was kind of concocted in a man's mind or a person's mind. This is something that exists subjectively. There seems, there's a drive to reproduce. You see it in single-celled organisms. You see it in birds and cats and everything else. So everybody's doing this thing, but there is no real perhaps objective purpose. And I think this is the great difficulty when you're going online or when you're trying to discover yourself, is you can't take somebody else's purpose, you can't take somebody else's meaning. It has to be tailor-fitted to you. There's an old character, he's called Faust, and he's a professor, he's an intellectual, and one day a demon, I forget his name now, Metalopolis or something like that, appears to him before him with a contract, and he says, for your soul you can have all these things, wealth, power, knowledge, And Faust signs this deal. In the beginning, he loves it. He's had, he has the power, the influence, the knowledge, and everything else. But slowly, the joy of these things eventually fade in the story, and he kind of then is left contemplating, thinking, he sold his soul for this. And I think that's one thing that you realise is your integrity as a person. For me personally, is the ultimate thing that I cannot compromise on. And no matter what, I can't trade anything for it. If I trade something for it, I will always feel a sense of loss.
I think for me it's like a Rolex. A fake Rolex is then what the religion represents once you've woken up. Because while everyone else might think it's real, the genuine article, deep down, it's not. You can't go on living with it. You eventually just take the Rolex off and you're like, no. And so it's better to live in the real world and take off that fake Rolex.
Take off
be
the fake
your authentic
Rolex.
self. Put on a cheaper watch that you actually can afford and you feel happy with, that you deserve, that you paid for. So we are done with the aspect of purpose and happiness. Next we'll be coming on to quite a sensitive topic. It's a very heavy topic, life and death. We've got a couple of questions. How do you deal with the death of a loved one? Sorry, heavy I know, says Anna. How has your view on death changed? Is it more daunting now that we know there isn't a resurrection and a paradise waiting for us? We have mixed responses on this. Find out what they are after this short break. Welcome back to the Truth Hurts podcast, where we're delving into some very meaty topics on life after leaving Jehovah's Witnesses. Currently, our perspective on life and death. Now, of course, when you're in the religion, it's a very anthropocentric worldview, isn't it? We as humans are at the middle of this power battle between Satan and Jehovah, a battle for universal sovereignty. Whether you touch yourself in bed at night, well, you're going to be pleasing Satan. Jehovah is going to be fuming. Whether you watch a soap opera, even a soap opera, Satan wants you to watch that. He wants you to watch these people shouting at each other and then take that into your own household. Jehovah wants you to put on Bambi. Or perhaps JW Broadcasting.
Yeah, probably.
So we go from this worldview where every
it?
single decision, every single thought we have is either essentially punishable or by Satan viewed as something which is really good because it means that he's going to grab your soul at Armageddon. We go from that to obviously our current perspective, which is agnostic atheist, which is we evolved on a planet's orbiting a sun. There is no God out there as far as we are aware, or that the evidence suggests is definitely real. And so from your perspective, when you went as a 20-year-old from that very intense mental situation, psychological balance of God and Satan and demons and angels, to there's nothing. No one's watching me. No one's inside my brain. There is no celestial dictator who wants me to do certain things. How did you deal with that?
I suppose it's quite hard not to fall into a pit of nihilism. It wasn't the thing that kind of started to dawn on me and upset me the most wasn't necessarily that there wasn't an incredible everlasting reward for me at the end of the horizon. The thing that upset me, I think Cato the Elder said quoted something about this, is not so, I don't want good deeds to be thanked, but I would rather bad deeds be punished. And I suppose that's a thought that I could echo, is that there's so many atrocities and abhorrent things that happen on the surface of this planet that there will never be justice for. There is such an imbalance of suffering that it's something that's quite hard to deal with, isn't it?
But that's all religion is. We're on the topic of life and death. It's a sense of, don't worry, justice will come. Ease your soul. You face injustice now, justice will come. And also, I've lost a loved one. Don't worry, there is hope for the future. So all this pain, all this angst in our mind suddenly disappears when we have religion. I think I've told you this before, but perhaps I'll share it with I suppose everyone on YouTube. And that's the fact that I did a little psychological experiment myself. Lying in bed one night, it's got to be months ago now, I said a prayer. I know the God that I'm believing in, apparently, when I'm saying my prayer, doesn't exist. The God that I'm praying to isn't real. But I thought, how, is this going to trick my mind? And I said a prayer, and before the prayer, I was anxious. There were many things that were kind of plaguing my mind and stresses. And yet once I shared that, a problem shared is a problem halved, with my Heavenly Father, I felt the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders. And we could see so many benefits, therefore, in terms of injustice being dealt with, death, seeing them again, that constant companion that is always there to hear you out. And so once you remove those, you do have to face the cold, hard reality of life. And it does give you a smack around the head. As you said, it's very easy to go into nihilism. And I suppose many of my perspectives on life, my viewpoints, are from a nihilistic base. However, from that nihilism, we have a real sense of overwhelming gratitude that we have this small gift that is life. And I think this is what I'd like to say to the exjw community as a whole, because you see a lot of people almost in this sense of, oh, my life is just, it's definitely like they're looking at a glass which is this and they're saying it's half empty from my perspective. Because what we can take for granted in life is our own existence and what led to it. So you might think, oh my goodness, my parents are shunning me, which my dad is shunning me, all that side of the family is. But if my dad wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, he wouldn't have met my mum on the ministry, hence I wouldn't have been born. So then the question is, would you take the life as it is, or would you not? And well, of course, I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be alive, especially when you consider the overwhelming odds against your very existence. I mean, I don't really use the term miracle, but there are many things which are almost miraculous, which lead people to saying, oh, there must be this deistic God. The universe, the position of Earth, the position of the sun, the orbit, the conditions that were just right for life, the abiogenesis which happened on our planet to then create evolution, and evolution which led to this and that, and then to, it's like, it's too good to be true. Well, no, we're here. We are living proof that we have this gift of life. We get a short few years on this planet. And so I think regarding life itself, I'm so grateful to wake up in the morning to be able to say, I'm still here. I've got another day. And the thought of losing that is one that then leads to death. Is one that wants to make me believe that there's a hope for the future. You were talking to me yesterday about the experience of your friend who kind of shared our perspective of agnostic atheism, but then...
Well, let me. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna go into it. So my friend, a former work colleague at a previous job I was at, very, very intelligent gentleman, very, very, I would probably say very sort of stereotypical, fedora-tipping sort of atheist. We're talking about a man who enjoys World of Warcraft, Dungeons and Dragons. He lives on 4chan. He doesn't have time for things you would consider ethereal or spiritual. These are like nonsense sort of words for him, useless terminology. Unfortunately, his father passed a few months ago. And then later, due to the pandemic we were in, his mother's cancer unfortunately wasn't picked up, and she now has terminal cancer in her spine. And I was kind of sharing a drink with him, and he was talking to me, and he looked at me with tears in his eyes, and he said, I don't want to live in a world where I don't think my dad is waiting for me somewhere. And that really hit me. And then in that moment there, I know it's very easy to look back at our religious history and maybe in religion in general and view it as this evil sort of dominating force that forces people to kill each other, abandon their families and do all these terrible things. But maybe at its core, maybe this thing merely started off as a comforting story to deal with the suffering of life.
Well, when you look back at the oldest civilizations, the oldest, in fact, humans in terms of migrating out of Africa, we see all these different parts of the world, especially Australia, where they have burial rituals and things like that. And you look in England, I've been to multiple rock formations, Stonehenge, Wales, they have all these different burial chambers, and they're all, aligned with the stars, and they all have these different gods and perspectives on life. And so, yeah, at the core is this fact that our hearts are hurting.
Yes, definitely. And unfortunately, I think definitely when concerning us, and obviously Jehovah's Witnesses that are watching, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, that are currently being shunned, there's almost this really upsetting kind of fact that lingers of all of the wasted time that you're going to have with those loved ones, those people you care about, and in a way that you'll maybe have to experience their death twice, once when you're disfellowshipped and once in a very literal sense. And I can understand a lot of pain and discomfort that comes with that, because it just feels, well, wasted and almost needlessly wasted. But unfortunately, we don't have access to our parents' software. The governing body does, and they can update it and reboot it and remap it whenever they want.
Well, Anna did say in the question, how do you deal with the death of a loved one? And I suppose the brutal answer is, you don't deal with it. You can't deal with it. It's something which we can't put words on. We can't describe that pain. I mean, I'm trying to, but I do have empathy. I haven't lost a close family member, although my mum's been on the brink of death since my early childhood with her extreme alcoholism. All my dad's side of the family, I feel like they've died. And I think they'll probably view me the same because of the rules on shunning and things like that. So when I have a window cleaning customer who says, I've lost my husband or my child died, my heart really goes out to them, because I know what it feels like, even though I don't in the physical sense. I know it in the sense of the injustice, the shunning process. And so I can really relate. Matt, what would you say to someone who's lost someone in death and they're asking, how can we deal with this?
I think however you can cope with it, I think is honest. If you need to tell yourself that your parents are somewhere waiting for you, whether that be in a Christian heaven or a spiritual place or some form of reincarnation, whatever helps you get through life, I think there's a terrible temptation, especially in the sort of a skeptic atheist community, is that you use your skepticism to dissolve any form of abstract concept or things that help you deal with the suffering of life, the little lies that you tell yourself. Well, unfortunately, sometimes if you keep digging, all you get is dirt, and maybe sometimes it's useful holding on to. You may say it's like, delusions, but if they help you deal with your life, I think it's perfectly healthy to adopt some. You get these things in films where you'll have the main character, the protagonist, and he's got like a lucky charm, and he's got to now face a beast or a challenge that is almost in his head there, insurmountable, but don't worry, because he has the trinket. And then obviously we find out later on in the film and how the story progresses that the trinket was meaningless. It was what was inside all along, the story that he told to himself that he believed that enabled him to overcome the challenge. And I think that's the same with our stories. Whether they're true or not doesn't matter, but if they help you get out of bed every day and face the challenges, and sometimes the hardest ones, whether that be, death, terminal illness, or lots of psychological trauma, if these things help you become strong, if they help you face the day, then you should keep them.
Wow, okay, so potentially believe in minor delusions is what you're saying, or be willing to entertain the fact that they could be real to help you just endure the reality of life.
Yeah.
Let's answer that first question. How has your view on death changed? Is it more daunting now we know there isn't a resurrection and a paradise waiting for us? I'd say yes and no. On the one hand, I no longer have to worry about, am I going to be there in paradise? Will God forgive my sins? My family are going to be waiting for me. Am I going to make it? I hope I do, and all that stress that goes on in the mind. But on the other hand, knowing that death is the ultimate end, that's very difficult to take. Knowing that everyone who's ever existed in the past will not get a second chance and are just buried in history, literally, and that's going to happen to us. Well, surely it forces us to gain a different perspective. Is death more daunting to you?
In the beginning, initially it was, because you have these expectations of living for eternity. So the kind of urgency of life evaporates and disappears. And then all of a sudden it all comes rushing towards you at once, and then you have to dawn on the thought of you're not going to be here anymore. And all of those experiences will go, and you'll be ravaged by time and forgotten at some point. And that's a difficult thing, I think, for the mind to comprehend and process. But I suppose after a while, you can't let things like not being alive or not existing hold you back from anything. I kind of adopted the philosophy of the samurai. There's a book called the Hadakure, and in chapter 1, it basically describes, wake up every morning as if your body was dead and throw yourself into challenges and you will awaken from your dreams.
Wow.
I think it's important to, live your life to the full. Definitely, no matter really how long it is. I personally wouldn't want to live until I'm well into my 80s and 90s, and I'm losing my mind and I'm defecating into a bedpan and I can't walk up a flight of stairs. That's something that isn't really appealing to me. If I were to have like a brief end in a sudden accident somewhere, I'd be completely fine with that.
Well, people call you the exjw rock star. By people, just me.
Yeah.
So Kurt Cobain over here wants an early death. Is that right?
Well,
you just want to enjoy your life and make it as fulfilling as possible in the short term, rather than live a long kind of boring life where you're concerned about, I need to eat enough greens so that when I'm 75 tomorrow, my skin still looks
exactly
good.
That's not something that concerns me.
You want to go hard before you go home.
Yeah.
All right, I want to transition it away from just humanity, because obviously we've been heavily anthropocentric, which is perfectly understandable. We're humans discussing topics which pertain to us as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. However, every other species on the planet, under the topic of life and death, they will die. As to when they die, that's an interesting topic, and one which obviously comes into the topic of veganism. Because this is a topic which really impacted me. It plagued my conscience and it plagued my soul. Perhaps the only thing to do so since leaving Jehovah's Witnesses. You know that I went vegan, vegetarian, back to meat and animal and dairy consumption, to vegan, to vegetarian, back currently to animal dairy consumption.
The cycle.
And it's very difficult because, if you were a Jehovah's Witness, Matt, and I say to you, I'm thinking about, I don't like what happens to animals and welfare standards. Shall I go vegan? What are you going to say? You're going to say, well, look what God said to Noah. You can now
eat the animals, I suppose. Yes, they allow themselves that get out, don't they?
And then in Genesis, you have all animals are subordinate to you. So we have a clear hierarchy from this heavily anthropocentric Bronze Age sort of humans, animals, to you then leave that and you realise, well, who's going to be the idiot who denies evolution? Even Jehovah's Witnesses accept microevolution, but when you realise macroevolution is true, our real history, the fact that we share this common ancestry and that this tree of life to which other species share with us, we all have this short gift on Earth, whether they realise it or not, whether they have the same level of consciousness or not. Well, that's irrespective of the fact that their life is important and they value it. They feel pain. There are many sentient beings. All this comes into mind when I've left the religion.
It's one of those things, I think, that when you leave organised religion, is you start to try and build your own kind of moral framework to view the world, and you want to view it from what is the life course that causes the least amount of suffering and the least amount of harm. So I think it's a natural inclination for people to turn to veganism, and it does seem to have a very poor retention rate. I remember being at work, and I used to work with a gentleman that was a very staunch vegan. He even tattooed the vegan tick onto his hand that you see in the vent. We're talking a true believer. And one day I sat down next to him, and he would usually tell me how the milk in my tea was rotting my bones or something like that. And I would sip of my tea, and then one day I look in disbelief as he's there consuming an English breakfast, and he's there like, sorry, I just had to. And there's this weird thing where I think your worldview, don't set yourself up to fail when you're building it.
I remember when I was vegan, there were many things I would say, such as, well, are your taste buds worth more than the death of an animal? But eventually I did come around to the realisation that it wasn't my taste buds. Yes, of course, when I eat something like a steak, it tastes good. Why does it taste good? And why is it not just my taste buds, but why does my body want it? My body didn't crave chicken as much as a vegan, but steak. I remember going out, and I'll always remember this. I'd been vegan for over 6 months. I think it was maybe 8.5 months. and I went out for a steak with my friend Sandy, and he ordered me it, and I was like, mate, well, now he's ordered it, I'm not going to waste it, because they'll just throw this, if I send it back, they'll probably throw it away, because it's cold, they can't serve it again. And the first mouthful of that steak, orgasmic.
Orgasmic.
Okay. Maybe it's too early to say that based on the fact that the next podcast is sex and relationships, but that was the real orgasm in my mouth. It was, what was going on there? Calcium, iron, vitamin D, vitamin B6, the red blood cells, the carnosine, creatine, magnesium, all of these things that my body had potentially been slightly deprived of, I was now getting it in abundance through red meat. And I think while, vegans, they try and replicate what meat would provide in their diet in a way in terms of supplements, which I did. I did take creatine and things like that. I'm not going to be getting all these metals and all these nutrients from the vegetable diet that I would be getting straight from an animal source. And so I can kind of understand why my body wanted that. I suppose the question that can be asked is, Harrison, where's your empathy gone? Where's your care gone? Especially if you're vegan or vegetarian yourself. And this isn't going to sit well with you if you come to my conclusions, especially if you view yourself, which I view myself as quite an empathetic, compassionate, virtuous individual.
Moral person, yes.
To then say, I'm sorry, but I'm a selfish animal. I'm a selfish animal who would prefer the death of other animals for myself to survive, rather than be this self-sacrificing Christian that I once was, who would put every other thing before me. Now you might say, well, does that mean that you support the current methods of mass production, animal welfare, which is poor, even in the best parts of the world, it's generally poor? No, I don't agree with that. I really don't. But what was the problem? Why was I vegan? And I boiled it down to this. The problem wasn't that animals were dying, because I know that if I lived 1,000 years ago, me and you would be going out and we'd be hunting and killing to survive. So that wasn't the issue. I'd be more than happy to slit the throat of an animal if it meant that I could feed myself and my family and my friends and things like that. The problem was modern mass production, this product-like viewpoint that we have on animals, the fact that we don't see chicken breasts in a supermarket as an animal, most people don't, the fact that we don't see a burger as an animal, it's just a product. And we just grab it, and multiple times a day we're grabbing it, and we don't have a perspective on life. So what being vegan has given me now is an immense appreciation for the food that I eat, for the animals that I consume, for the sacrifice that they had to endure for me to enjoy eating them and their products. It's almost, I think at the start I almost said a prayer thanking them, obviously not to anyone, but I would literally say, I'm so grateful. And I'd say to Melissa as well, because she went vegan with me. I said, when I came out of it, I said, I'm so grateful for this animal. I'm so grateful. So, just like an Egyptian mummy, that wraps up life and death. Next, we head into your questions. And there are some crackers. So thank you to everyone who sent in questions for this podcast and the next one. I've divided them into two sections. So we're going to take on the ones that pertain more to the purpose, happiness, life and death section. Starting with this one from Dominic Esposito at Dansacaduro.
Dansacaduro.
Yes. What a name.
Banger.
It's a great song. Dominic, fair play for that name. How to very carefully plant seeds of doubt in PMEs, which is physically in, mentally in Jehovah's Witnesses, without scaring them away and actually getting them to think reasonably for once in their lives, like which points to make that will have the greatest effect.
I think it's like, we take a leaf out of, Spider-Man's book, with great power comes great responsibility. I think one of the very important questions to ask before you do anything like this is, does this person want to be saved? Am I going to cause more damage, this person leaving, than I am any potential benefit, which is a very difficult case-by-case thing. And I think this should always be treated with almost kid gloves. I mean, I remember when I first left the religion, and your bones are on fire with this passion and this truth that you bridle with you, and you kind of want to scream it from the top of every hill of, this isn't true, this is my story, please see me. And I think it's good to try and temper that.
No,
Definitely.
I remember when I obviously woke up and then I was talking to my dad. My dad was just around 50 years old at the time. So I thought, well, we might have another 40, 50 years left. This is my dad. I'd want to wake him up. And I shared all of my knowledge, all of my evidence that I didn't have as a Jehovah's Witness with him, in the hope that he might wake up and that he might see the reason, come to the light, so to speak. However, when I went to my nan and granddad's house, had a chat with them, and I only just touched on the different topics. I didn't want to go into them because I actually didn't want to wake them up. If these guys wake up in their late 70s, Matt, you say it's going to potentially do more damage than good. I can't see any good coming from
just
that.
a lot of psychological
Because
trauma.
one of them's going to pass away very soon. It leaves the other one with no hope for the future for them.
Yes.
If one of them wakes up, will that actually ruin a marriage that has lasted over 50 years because the other one will view them like the devil? So yeah, as you say, we need to be very careful. And the first thought is, does this person want to be saved? Do they actually, would they be happy if they've woken up? As a direct answer to the question, I would say, don't go in hard on Jehovah's Witness niche doctrine. They will know that you're either an ex-Jehovah's Witness or you've studied the religion and decided not to join irrespective. So they will know you're not there for any good reason from their perspective. What they are looking for is honesty, humility, and hunger for truth. The 3 H's, as I was told as a Jehovah's Witness. So if you go up to them and you say, hiya, you be the Jehovah's Witness, hiya.
Oh, hello.
So I just had a question for you guys. Would you mind answering it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if it's anything we can't cover, go to the org.
So, yeah, growing up, my dad was Christian. My mum wasn't. But my dad obviously taught me about this loving God. But I could never really believe in that God. And I think it was because of animals and life on Earth. I mean, I watched a film growing up called Jurassic Park. And that's obviously based upon fossilised evidence of their design and things like this. And I just couldn't synchronise and put together the loving God with what the evidence suggested. What's your view on this?
Well, I mean, we're probably, they would probably say something like they're more focused on, the kind of the cosmic battle between good and evil. I mean, I think when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses and prehistory and stuff like that, that's something that they put to the back of their mind. They kind of want to focus on Adam sinned, Jesus made up for that in his sacrifice, and this is the only journey that matters to them. But I think you're definitely onto something, and I completely agree with you. Is you can't go in at Jehovah's Witness doctrine because that immediately brings up loads of red flags.
I'm sure you'd agree that my approach with you as a Jehovah's Witness was non-threatening. I came across as honest, this is my life story, but also hungry for the truth because I have a question that I want you to ask. And I'm humble enough to approach you on a cart. So I think I ticked all 3 of the boxes. And yeah, if I do that in future, I will let you know how it goes with regards to speaking to someone on cart witnessing. Is there any changes, this is from Josh, any changes that the Jehovah's Witness organisation could or should make that would potentially entice you into going back to them? What would it take to want to rejoin? I think from my perspective, immediately, there are changes they could make to make it a better, more modern, peaceable, agreeable, more humane religion, such as deleting some of the policies.
Yeah.
However, in terms of going back,
there's nothing, is there?
There's nothing.
There's nothing, because it would be to go back would be to live
put on
to
the
live a lie,
fake Rolex.
to put on the fake Rolex again. So it's just yeah. There isn't anything they could dangle. There is no carrot they have that would ever make me walk back.
No. So E. Rose Chambers asks, how is it possible to let go of the guilt after we leave?
Okay, so
Now, I didn't understand really the guilt of what. So that's exactly what I asked them. And they said, sure, I'll explain. The guilt may be feelings of fear some of us experience after we leave, even though in our hearts we know that it's wrong in terms of the organisation, its teachings, hence why we left.
Yes.
But because we were ingrained for so long of how we were sinners now that we've left, the threat of Armageddon was so ingrained in us since birth, sometimes I feel it's very hard to loosen that grip and feel at peace with my choice. So how can you reassure someone that their choice to leave the organisation was correct and that these fears of being a sinner and Armageddon are irrational?
I don't know. I think human beings are irrational by nature. I think I've spoke to you before. It's this sense of almost impending doom, and I don't know if it's because of it's what sells in the media. I mean, obviously we have lots of global conflicts going on at the moment, which causes a lot of people of panic and anxiety. But you even see it in religions that aren't even Jehovah's Witnesses. Obviously, we have Armageddon. You have Ragnarok for the Norse mythology, and then I think the Greek pantheon faces oblivion at some point. There seems to be this feeling, this existential background dread that I think always exists of something really bad could happen and this could all be over tomorrow. And I don't think you're ever going to eliminate that. I think it's good probably maybe just occupy your mind with positive thoughts and things that you're progressing with in your own life. I understand weird things like irrational guilt though over things. I still get things now if I sit down and watch particular films, if it has a spiritual element, a Ouija board or something comes out and there's this little voice in the back of your head like, you're going to die in Armageddon. And you're there like, oh.
So why is the voice in your head Jordan Peterson?
I don't know. Isn't that everyone's voice?
I'm not sure I even would do a Ouija board, even though I know it's nonsense.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's just
so
a weird
ingrained,
thing,
isn't it? So yeah, at the start, I really wasn't sure about this question. I was like, well, this is just completely irrational. She's talking nonsense. Why should you be afraid of Armageddon? But each of us have our own devices in terms of what's going to really crank up the pressure on our psychological baggage that's left over from the organisation. Final question in this section: how to know where one goes after leaving the cult? How to get rid of that codependency? How to know where one goes? I think that's putting it... There is nowhere to go that we could suggest, right? Because we don't know who you are watching. We don't know what your interests are, what you like. I could say go to a 10-pin bowling club and sign up for that. But if you detest 10-pin bowling and you don't want to be around people in terms of a club, that's not going to be right for you. I mean, what would you say to that question? Where does someone go after leaving? I think many people naturally fall into another community, which is the exjw community on the Reddit and things like that.
I think people do in the initial steps. I think it's very good because you have that initial rage, that burning, that passion, and you want to find other people that can relate to you on that level, because you're such a small segment of the population. You're not going to find a lot of people that have been through your own story. So you need to, I think, find that commonality and then settle in and find out who you are, because everything is stormy at the moment. And I forgot the philosopher who said it, but it's like, if you don't know which port you're going to be at, no wind you'll find will be favourable. You need to have a direction, and you're only going to find that direction through your own self-discovery. So you need to find your own hobbies, your own passions, your own interests, which is a lot harder than you think it is. I think it's good to play almost in a way thought exercises. So you've won the lottery, you've won the Euro Millions or whatever else, you've got 300 million in your bank account. How would you live your life? And then picture it, because a lot of people, we kind of put these barriers in the way, saying, okay, well, I can't really do that because I have limited resources and time. But okay, just take those barriers away, and then what life are you left with? Do you have a lovely country home with an orchard and you make your own juices? I don't know, something like that. And then you go, okay, well, can I take core elements from this fantasy and can I implement those in my day-to-day life?
And that's a nice place to leave this set of particular questions, because on the next podcast, Life After Leaving, I suppose part 2 of this discussion, which is friends and family, believing friends, believing family, non-believing friends, non-believing family, the dynamics of those relationships, how they change, how we deal with the shunning process itself, and also sex and relationships. Big topic. How does being in a cult influence our sexuality, the repression we face earlier in our life? How does that impact on what we want to do outside when we finally wake up and leave, and no longer have prying eyes from those inside the congregation, but more importantly, our Heavenly Father telling us what's right and what's wrong? So there's a lot to discuss next time. But for now, Matt, thank you so much. Cheers. And I really mean that. Thank you for joining me in this podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you have, please leave a like. Please comment on your thoughts on it so we know which direction to go, and potentially in future podcasts if you have suggestions too. But for now, thank you for watching, and we'll see you for Life After Leaving Part 2.